The History of Ireland 800-1169 covers the period in the history of Ireland from the first Viking raids to the Norman invasion. The first 2 centuries of this period are characterized by Viking raids and the subsequent Norse settlements along the coast. Viking ports were established at Dublin, Wexford, Waterford, Cork and Limerick, which became the first large towns in Ireland. Ireland consisted of many semi-independent Tuatha, and during the whole period attempts were made by various factions to gain political control over the whole of the island. For the first 2 centuries of this period this was mainly a rivalry between High Kings of Ireland from the northern and southern branch of the ULAN. The one who came closest to being de facto king over the whole of Ireland, however, was Brian Boru, the first High King in this period not belonging to the ULAN. Following Brian's death at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, the political situation became more complex with rivalry for high kingship from several clans and dynasties. Brian's descendants failed to maintain a unified throne, and regional squabbling over territory led indirectly to the invasion of the Normans under Richard de Clare in 1169. Historiography. Due to the rich amount of written sources, the study of Irish history 800-1169 has to a large extent focused on gathering, interpretation and textual criticism of these. Only recently have other sources of historical knowledge received more attention, in particular archaeology. Since the modern excavations of Dublin started in 1961, followed by similar efforts in Wexford, Waterford and Limerick, great advances have been made in the understanding of the physical character of the towns established in this period. The first part of the period from 800 to 1014 is well studied. The Viking Age has attracted the interest of historians for quite some time. The period between 1014 and 1169 has received less attention. In the words of Sean Duffy, this period has, historiographically speaking, fallen between 2 stools. Historians of early medieval Ireland, seeking to conclude their narratives on a high note, have traditionally done so after recounting the death of the famous High King Brian Barama at the Battle of Clontarf in 1014. On the other hand, historians of later medieval Ireland generally choose to begin proceedings with the English invasion of the 1160s. 11th and early 12th century Ireland has, therefore, often assumed the character of a snappy epilogue or a lengthy prologue, in trying to interpret the history of early Ireland. One of the most frequently asked questions addressed by historians is how early it is possible to speak of an Irish nation, a natio encompassing the whole island of Ireland. Early poet-historians like Flann Streck constructed a history of a monarchy of all Ireland going back to St. Patrick and beyond. Only 100 years after Flann, Gerald of Wales described the Irish society in his Topographia Hibernica as utterly primitive and savage. At the beginning of modern scholarly interpretation of Irish history, Owen MacNeill and G.H. Orpen came to opposite conclusions analyzing the same period. Orpen saw an anarchic country still in a tribal state. He could see no natio, no wider community in Ireland than the tribe. MacNeill stressed the reality of the High Kingship of Ireland and the existence of many of those institutions of government which Orpen found wanting, and claimed that Irish law had a national character. Nature of the written sources. A large body of contemporary and near-contemporary material on early medieval Ireland has survived. From the titles of works mentioned in these sources, it is clear that a great deal of additional material has now been lost. The surviving materials usually exist in the form of much later copies, and it is only from comparison of the various texts that the original documents can be reconstructed. Extant Irish annals are ultimately derived from the now lost Chronicle of Ireland, which was probably being compiled in the Midlands of Ireland by around 800. All include material derived from other sources, or added at a later date. The Annals of Ulster and the Annals of Innisfallen cover most of this period, but has a gap between 1132 and 1155. The Annals of Clonmacnoise survive only in an eccentric 17th-century English translation, and the Annals of Tigernach for this period are lost, with Dubhaltash Mac Fearbisai's abbreviated copy known as the Chronicon Scotorum supplying only part of the missing material. The Annals of the Four Masters are late, and include some material of doubtful origin. While the Annals provide a considerable amount of information, they are generally terse, and most focus their attention on the doings of the Irini Acutilan of churchmen. In addition to the Annals, a large number of genealogies survive along with geographical and legal texts, poetry, sagas and hagiography. In the 12th century, propaganda texts like Cathraim Chelachane Shazel and Cogadgadal Regalib were composed. Even though the historical accuracy of these accounts is dubious, the Cogad especially has had a great impact on the interpretation of Irish medieval history until recently. Political landscape c. 800. At the end of the 8th century, Ireland was homogeneously Gaelic, in terms of society, culture and language. People lived in rural communities, and the only larger settlements were monastic towns of varying sizes. The monasteries played an important part in society, not just with regards to religious and cultural life but also economy and politics. Christianization had begun in the 5th century, and by the early 9th century the island was almost wholly Christian. However, the martyrology of Taller hints that paganism had not yet been fully uprooted. Owen MacNeill identified the oldest certain fact in the political history of Ireland as the existence in late prehistory of a Pentucky, probably consisting of the Coisader or fifths of the Ulaid, the Connachtcha, the Lagan, Mumu and Maid, although some accounts discount Maid and split Mumu in two. This is not an accurate description of the political landscape c. 800. But when discussing the political subdivisions of Ireland at this time, it is still useful to refer to this system. If Lagan and Maid are combined as Leinster, it roughly corresponds with the modern four provinces of Ireland. The Uini Acutial, divided in two main branches known as Northern Uini Acutial and Southern Uini Acutial, was the leading dynasty in Ireland. The Northern Uini Acutial controlled the northwestern part of Ireland, and was divided into two leading branches. The Ceni Acutial Conail in the west and Ceni Acutial Neogain, also known as the Kingdom of Ileach. Ceni Acutial Neogain had become the more powerful of the two in 789, and had expanded east and southwards, gaining control over the important monastic centre Armagh and the large sub-kingdom of Airgila. The traditional Kingdom of Ulaid, dominated by Dalfiartich and Dal Narada, was now more or less confined to the area east of the River Bann. The central region of Maid had been dominated by what became known as the Southern Uini Acutial since the 7th century. Until the 8th century, the Silnarados lane was preeminent, but from 728, the Western dynasty of Clan Charmaine was dominant. In Lagan, Uí Dunlanger was the dominant dynasty c. 800. They were closely associated with the large monastery of Kildare. Their main rival for dominance in Leinster, the Uí had not been able to claim the title King of Leinster since 728. The Uí now controlled a territory in the southeastern part of Leinster, and had close links to the monastery of Ferns. The Kingdom of Austria, occupying roughly the same area as the present County Kilkenny and Western County Laois, was considered part of Munster until the late 9th century, when it received an independent status under King Cerbal Mac Dunlanger. Munster was dominated by the Eoganecta, centred around Cashel and with Emly as ecclesiastical centre. The Dalgcais had defeated the Cork Umodruad in 744 and taken control over the area in present County Clare, from which they would later rise to dominance. but were not yet a significant power in Munster. The Eoganacta rivaled the Ueni in power and influence, and claimed suzerainty over the southern part of Ireland. This claim was in part anchored within the legendary ancient division of the island in Leith Cuin and Leith Moga, Cons half and Mugs half. During the 7th century the Uí had emerged in Connacht, and since the first half of the 8th century been a dominant dynasty. Uí also influenced the Kingdom of Bryfna on the southern borders of the northern Ueni. First Viking Age. Early Viking raids. The early Vikings were a group of people who originated in modern-day Denmark and Norway. In the 700s, pressure on land in Scandinavia had forced many nobles and warriors to seek land elsewhere. Some of these were younger sons, who stood to inherit nothing of their father's estate. Noblemen with little to lose began to gather together groups of warriors and go down the coast pillaging settlements. The first recorded Viking raid in Irish history occurred in AD 795 when Vikings, possibly from Norway, looted the island of Lamby. This was followed by a raid on the coast of Braga in 798, and raids on the coast of Connacht in 807. These early Viking raids were generally small in scale and quick. These early raids interrupted the golden age of Christian Irish culture and marked the beginning of 200 years of intermittent warfare, with waves of Viking raiders plundering monasteries and towns throughout Ireland. Most of the early raiders came from the fjords of western Norway. They are believed to have sailed first to Shetland, then south to Orkney. The Vikings would have then sailed down the Atlantic coast of Scotland, and then over to Ireland. During these early raids the Vikings also travelled to the west coast of Ireland to the Skellig Islands located off the coast of County Kerry. The early raids on Ireland seem to have been aristocratic free enterprise, and named leaders appear in the Irish annals. Saxo Ulb in 837, Turges in 845, Agon in 847. Aed Adnide of the Ceni Acutel Neogain branch of the northern Ueni Acutil became king of Tara in 797, after the death of his predecessor, father-in-law and political rival Don Chadmidi. This followed the classic Ueni Acutil political arrangement, where over-kingship alternated regularly between Ceni Acutel Neogain and Clan Charmaine of the southern Ueni Acutil. During his reign he campaigned in Mide, Leinster, and Ulaid to assert his authority, though unlike Donchad he did not campaign in Munster. Thomas Charles Edwards credits Aed for the absence of any major Viking attacks on Ireland during his reign after 798. The Annals gives no reference, however, to Aed at any time being involved with warfare against Viking raiders. Aed was connected to the monastic community at Armagh, and a supporter of the Familia of Patrick. His rivals for supremacy within Ueni Acutil, the Clan Charmaine and the Ceni Acutil Conail, had on the other hand supported the Familia of Columba. During Ead's reign the Columban Familia, following several Viking raids against Iona, established a new monastery at Kells, a royal site in the possession of Armagh. Byrne states that, the foundation of Kells marked the resolution of any remaining rivalry between the Columban and patrician churches. That the community of Columba in 817 tried to have Aed excommunicated may show that not all rivalry was resolved after all. Rivalry between North and South Feudal Mac Crimthian from the Eoganacht Shazel acceded to the kingship of Munster in 820. Beginning a 130-year domination by this branch of Eoganacta, combining military campaigns with manipulation of ecclesiastical affairs. He embarked on a policy of aggressive expansion to counter the growth in power of the Ueni Acutil. Conchobar Mac Donchada succeeded Aed Adnide as Ueni Acutil over king in 819, and soon found himself challenged by Fidlimid. both by Fidlimid launching raids into Maid and Connacht and by him interfering in the affairs of Armagh. Conchobar and Fidlimid met at Bur in 827 to discuss peace terms, and the very fact that the King of Munster could force the High King to a peace conference is indicative of Fidlimid's growing power. Conchobar was succeeded by Niall Kai in 833. With Niall, we for the first time see a reference in the annals of Rieni Acutil leading an army against the Vikings. He defeated Viking Raiders in Derry the same year. He sought to further expand Rieni Acutil influence in the south. In 835 he led an army to Leinster and installed Bran mac Fialan as King of Leinster, and also invaded Maid. This brought him into conflict with Fidlimid, however, and in 838 a conference between Niall and Fidlimid was held. This meeting did not result in any lasting peace though. In 840 Fidlimid led an army into Maid and encamped at Tara, thereby challenging the Rieni Acutil also in the north. In 841, however, Fidlimid was routed in battle by Niall in Leinster. His successors in the south would not be able to challenge the north again to this extent until some 150 years later. Intensified raiding and the first Viking settlements in Ireland. The Viking raids on Ireland resumed in 821, and intensified during the following decades. The Vikings were beginning to establish fortified encampments, longports, along the Irish coast and overwintering in Ireland instead of retreating to Scandinavia or British bases. The first known longports were at Linduishal and Duiblin. They were also moving further inland to attack, often using rivers such as the Shannon, and then retreating to their coastal bases. The raiding parties also increased in size, becoming regular armies. In 837 the annals report a fleet of 60 longships on the Liffey, carrying 1,500 men. One of the first named Viking leaders was Thorgest. The annals of the Four Masters connect him with attacks on Connacht, Maid and the church at Clonmacnoise in 844. He was captured and drowned in Lough Owel by Mael Secnal mac Mael Ruinade, king of Maid. In 848 a Norse army was defeated at Siath-Necton by Olchobar mac Sinida of Munster and Lorcan mac Seleg of Leinster. For the first time the leader of the Vikings is described as royalty from Lough Clan. Mael Secnal, now High King, defeated another army at Forarch the same year. These victories form the background of an embassy sent to the Frankish Emperor Charles the Bald, reported in the An Albertiniani. In 853 Olaf, identified as a son of the King of Lochlan, came to Ireland. Lochlan has been understood as present Norway. It is now considered more plausible that it refers to a Scandinavian colony in the Western Isles of Scotland. Olaf assumed leadership of the Vikings in Ireland, probably in some way shared with his kinsman Ivar, first mentioned in the Irish annals in 857. Olaf and Ivar remained active in Ireland and around the Irish Sea for the next 2 decades. The descendants of Ivar, the Iriamer, would be an important political factor for the next 2 centuries. Shifting alliances and struggle for power. A significant new trait from the middle of the 9th century was that the Norse now also entered alliances with various Irish rulers. Cerbul mac Dunlanger had become King of Austria in 842. Cerbul had defeated Viking Raiders in 846 and 847, but from 858 he is allied with Olaf and Ivar against Mael Secnal, campaigning in Leinster and Munster, and in 859 also raiding Mael Secnal's heartlands in Maid, though Cerbul had to submit to Mael Secnal later the same year. These alliances were by no means permanent. In 860 Cerbul was allied with Mael Secnal in a campaign against Aed Findlaeth of the northern Ueni Acutil, while Olaf and Ivar has allied themselves with Aed. In 870, however, Cerbul and Aed appeared as allies in Leinster. Mael Secnal had more success as High King than his predecessors Niall Kai and Conor Donchada in dealing bargaining with the south, and forced Munster into submission in 858, and as noted above, Ottryger in 859. He also asserted control over Ulaid, Leinster and Connacht, and was in his obituary in the Annals of Ulster described as Re-Echaran Uile, King of all Ireland. The last years of his reign he had however experienced serious opposition from his Uini Acutil kinsmen of Eilich and Braga, allied with the Norse of Dublin. Byrne notes, Mael Secnal's unprecedented success in achieving the high kingship of all Ireland was marred by the chronic complaint of Irish politics. Having united the Ulaid, Munster, Ottryger, Connacht and Leinster, he was attacked at the end of his reign by a combination of Uini Acutil kings. Aed Findlaeth was king of Eilich and the leading king within the northern Uini Acutil. After the death of Mael Secnal he is counted in the regal lists as High King, following the established scheme where this alternated between Uini Acutil Neogain in the north and Clanchamain of Maid. His kingship was disputed though, and he did not come close to being an actual king over Ireland. He could count some successes against the Norse, however, most notably burning all the Norse longports in the north in 866. Aed seems to have used the opportunity while Olaf was involved in warfare in Pictland, presumably bringing a large contingent of the Norse forces in Ireland with him. The Vikings never managed to establish permanent settlements in the north. O'Carrain observes, ironically, Aed Findlaeth's success may have held back the economic development of the north and ultimately prevented the growth of port towns like those on the east and south coasts, on which the Leinster and Munster kings subsequently depended for much of their wealth. The last report of Olaf is when he and Ivar returned to Dublin in 871 from Alba. Ivar died in 873. In his obituary, the Annals of Ulster call Ivar king of the Norsemen of all Ireland and Britain. With their disappearance, there were frequent changes of leadership among the Norse in Ireland, and a great deal of internecine conflict is reported for the following decades. In 902 Maelfinia mac Flanacane of Braga and Serbal mac Muircane of Leinster joined forces against Dublin, and the heathens were driven from Ireland, i.e., from the fortress of Athcliath, Dublin.